You are sitting in a room that smells like cheap coffee, floor wax, and the stale sweat of anxiety. The fluorescent lights are humming, a low-frequency buzz that seems to be vibrating right behind your eyes. You aren't looking at the judge. You aren't looking at the stenographer whose fingers are twitching over the keys, recording the destruction of your life in real time. You are looking at the back of their head, the person you used to hold, the person you whispered secrets to in the dark, the person you promised to protect. They are sitting 10 feet away, whispering to a stranger in a navy blue suit, a stranger who charges $400 an hour to dismantle the architecture of your existence. You watch them nod. You watch them point at a piece of paper. You catch a glimpse of their profile, and you look for a trace of the person you married. You look for sadness. You look for regret. You look for shared history. But you don't see any of that. You see a plaintiff. You hear the lawyer say the number. It hangs in the air like a physical weight. It's not just a number. It represents time. It represents the 15 years you spent grinding in a cubicle you hated. It represents the weekends you missed. It represents the stress ulcers and the sleepless nights and the early mornings where you dragged yourself out of bed to build a future. And in one sentence, half of that future is gone. Actually, it's more than half, because you aren't just losing the assets. You're losing the compounding interest. You're losing the leverage. You're losing the ability to ever retire when you plan to. You are watching a spreadsheet projected on the wall of your mind, and the red line is plummeting straight down. Pause. Look at your hands. They're shaking. Not much, just a little tremor in the fingers. You clasp them together to stop it, rewind the tape, go back 10 years. Go back to the day you signed the contract. You remember it, don't you? The music, the flowers, the applause. You were standing there, smiling like an idiot, surrounded by everyone you know. You thought you were the luckiest person in the world. You thought you were winning. You looked into their eyes and said, "I do." But you didn't know what you were doing. You thought you were entering a partnership based on love, trust, and mutual respect. You thought you were building a cathedral. You didn't realize you were actually walking into a highly regulated government institution and signing a binding legal document with the state as a third party. You didn't read the fine print, because there was no fine print on that day. The priest didn't read you the divorce statutes. The officiant didn't explain the state's laws regarding alimony and asset division. Nobody handed you a prospectus outlining the risk factors. If you were buying a franchise, or investing in a hedge fund, or even just signing a lease on a Toyota Camry, you would have asked more questions. You would have read the terms. You would have consulted a lawyer. But because it was love, because it was romance, you signed a blank check payable to the future version of the person standing next to you, a person who, statistically speaking, is likely to become your adversary. Flash forward back to the courtroom. The judge is speaking now. He sounds bored. This is just a Tuesday for him. He is dissolving your life with the same emotional detachment as a clerk scanning groceries. Equitable distribution, he calls it, that word. Equitable. It sounds fair, doesn't it? It sounds balanced. But when you look at the math, it feels like a robbery. You are the one who worked 80-hour weeks. You are the one who took the risks. You are the one who built the business, or climbed the ladder, or saved every penny while they wanted to go on vacations and lease new cars. You were the saver. They were the spender. And now, the law says the spender is entitled to the saver's harvest. You feel a wave of nausea. It's a specific kind of sickness. It's the realization that you have been the architect of your own destruction. You invited this. You opened the door. You brought the Trojan horse into your living room and fed it every day for a decade. You look at them again. They aren't looking at you. They are checking their phone, and that's when the blade twists. This isn't just about money. If a stranger robbed you at gunpoint in an alley, you could process that. That's a crime. That's an external event. You can hate the criminal. You can file a police report. You can move on. But this is an inside job. The person extracting your wealth is the person who knows your weaknesses. The person using your children as leverage is the person who helped you name them. The person demanding lifestyle maintenance is the person who never maintained anything but their own comfort. You realize with a cold, paralyzing clarity that you are not in a relationship. You never were. You were in a business arrangement where you held all the liability and they held all the options. You have committed financial suicide. You put the gun to your head on your wedding day. You smiled as you did it. You let your friends cheer as you pulled the hammer back. You spent 10 years waiting for the bullet to travel through the chamber. And today, right now, as the gavel comes down, is the day the bullet finally hits. The judge signs the order. It's done. You walk out of the courtroom into the bright, harsh sunlight of the parking lot. You walk to your car, which is still yours for now, though you'll have to refinance it to pay the settlement. You sit in the driver's seat. You don't start the engine. You just sit there. You do the math again. You are 45 years old. Your net worth has been cut in half. Your retirement date has pushed back to never. Your monthly cash flow is decimated by support payments. You realize you are starting over from zero, but with less energy, more cynicism, and a mountain of legal debt. People call this moving on. People call this a fresh start. Wrong. This is a liquidation sale of your life's work. This is the financial equivalent of a terminal diagnosis. And the most painful part isn't the money. It isn't the house. It isn't the car. It's the realization that the system was designed to do this. The trap was set before you were even born. You just walked right into it because you were too busy looking at the flowers to notice the steel jaws beneath the petals. And now, you're bleeding out. Think about the last time you bought a used car. Maybe it was years ago. Maybe it was a Beta you bought in college. Picture yourself standing on the asphalt lot. The salesman is talking fast, telling you what a great deal this is. But you don't listen. You're smart. You're cautious. You walk around the vehicle. You crouch down to look at the tires, checking the tread depth. You run your hand along the fender, feeling for the rough texture of a cheap paint job that might be hiding rust or accident damage. You pop the hood. You pull the dipstick and rub the oil between your fingers, looking for grit, smelling for burning. You demand the Carfax report. You want to know the history. You want to know if it's been in a wreck. You want to know if the previous owner abused it. And when it comes time to talk numbers, you sit in that cubicle and you fight. You haggle over $500. You read the financing terms 3 times. You make sure you aren't getting screwed on the interest rate. You are vigilant. You are a shark. Because you know that if you buy a lemon, it's going to cost you. Now, pause. Freeze that image of you, the careful, discerning consumer who sweats the details of a $10,000 liability. Now, let's look at the day you got married. You went down to the county clerk's office, or maybe City Hall. You stood in a line. When you got to the window, they handed you a piece of paper. Did you read it? I don't mean did you check if they spelled your name right. I mean, did you read the terms of the contract? Did you ask the clerk? Excuse me, in the event of a dissolution of this contract, how does the state determine the division of future assets acquired during the term? Did you ask? What are the penalties for breach of contract? If my partner cheats, does that void their claim to my retirement accounts? Did you ask? Is this a limited liability partnership, or am I accepting unlimited joint liability for my partner's future debts? No. You didn't ask a single damn question. You just signed. You vetted a 2008 Honda Civic with more scrutiny than you applied to the most legally binding financially devastating contract of your entire life. Think about the absurdity of that. If a stranger walked up to you on the street and said, "Hey, sign this document. It says that if we ever stop liking each other, I get half of everything you own, and you might have to pay me 30% of your income for the next 10 years. You would laugh in their face. You would call the police. You would think they were insane. But put a tuxedo on that stranger. Put a white dress on them. Add a 3-tier cake and an open bar. Suddenly, you're scrambling to find a pen. You didn't just sign a blind contract. You signed a contract that doesn't even have the terms written on it. When you sign a marriage license, you're agreeing to be bound by the state's family law code. Do you know what's in that code? Have you read the statutes for your specific jurisdiction? Of course not. You signed a blank check and handed it to the government, trusting them to fill in the numbers later. And why did you do it? Because you were groomed to. From the time you were a child, you were fed a steady diet of propaganda. Disney movies where the wedding is the happy ending. Romantic comedies where the grand gesture solves everything. Pop songs that equate obsession with devotion. Society told you that asking questions is unromantic. Society told you that protecting yourself is pessimistic. Society told you that a prenuptial agreement is planning for failure. So you turned off your brain, you suppressed your survival instinct, you let the chemicals in your bloodstream, the dopamine, the oxytocin, override your logical faculties. You told yourself, we're different, we're in love, we don't need to worry about the legal stuff. That is the lie. That is the bait. Love is a biological drive. Marriage is a legal corporation. You confused the two. You try to solve an emotional desire with a bureaucratic instrument. Imagine starting a business with a partner. You go to the bank to open a joint account. You put all your life savings in. And then you say, we don't need a partnership agreement. We really like hanging out together, so it'll work out. That business would be bankrupt in 6 months. Investors would run away screaming. It would be considered gross negligence. But in your personal life, you did exactly that. You looked at the person across the table, a person with their own debts, their own traumas, their own hidden agendas, their own capacity for change. And you merged your legal identity with theirs based on a feeling that usually lasts about 18 months. You didn't check their credit score. You didn't audit their spending habits. You didn't interview their previous partners to see why the last merger failed. You just closed your eyes, gripped the pen, and signed your name on the line that might as well have been labeled voluntary financial ruin. And you smiled while you did it. You let people take pictures of the moment you signed your own warrant. You framed it and put it on the wall. You look at that photo now, and you don't see love. You see negligence. You see a fool who walked into a minefield because the grass looked pretty. Go to your bedroom. Stand in the doorway and look at the bed. It looks intimate, doesn't it? It looks like a sanctuary. That is where you sleep. That is where you make love. That is where you whisper the things you wouldn't say to anyone else. You look at those 2 pillows and you see a private world built for 2. You are hallucinating. There are not 2 people in that marriage. There are 3. There is you. There is your spouse. And right there between you, taking up the most space, holding all the power, is the state. You think I'm being metaphorical. You think I'm being poetic. Go find your marriage license. Look at the top of the document. It doesn't say Holy Covenant of Love. It says State of your state. It bears the seal of the government. Why do you think you need a license to get married? You need a license to drive a car because the state owns the roads. You need a license to practice medicine because the state regulates public safety. You need a license to hunt because the state owns the wildlife. When you applied for a marriage license, you were asking the government for permission to enter into a specific legal status. You were inviting the government into your relationship, and granting them jurisdiction over your assets, your children, and your future income. You turned your private relationship into a public corporation. And in this corporation, the government is the majority shareholder. Think about what that means. In a normal contract between two business partners, you write the terms. You decide what happens if you split up. You decide who owns the intellectual property. You decide the exit strategy. If you don't like the terms, you negotiate. If you can't agree, you don't sign. But in a marriage, the state writes the terms. And here is the terrifying part. The state can change the terms after you sign. Imagine you sign a contract to buy a house for $300,000. 5 years later, the government passes a new law that says, actually, because the market changed, you now owe $600,000 for that house. You would sue, you would scream, it would be illegal. But in marriage, that happens every day. Legislators, people you have never met, people who don't know your name, people who are pandering to voters, can rewrite the divorce laws in your state at any time. They can change the alimony formula. They can change the custody presumptions. They can change the definition of marital property. And you are bound by those changes. You signed up for a dynamic contract where the rules are fluid and you have zero control over the amendments. You thought you were making a vow to God. The judge doesn't care about God. The judge cares about the statutes. You thought you were making a promise to your partner. That promise is irrelevant if it conflicts with the state's public policy. When you file for divorce, you aren't just breaking up. You are filing a lawsuit against the other person, petitioning the state to intervene and liquidate the partnership according to their rules. You are standing in court saying, "Please, government, tell me how often I can see my own children. Please, government, tell me how much of my own paycheck I am allowed to keep." You have voluntarily surrendered your autonomy. Why does the state care? Why do they want to be in your bed? Because marriage is the primary unit of economic production and social order. They need you to produce future taxpayers' children. They need you to provide a social safety net for each other so they don't have to. Marriage is a privatization of welfare. When you are married, you are legally responsible for your spouse. If they get sick, you pay. If they go into debt, you suffer. The state loves this. It gets them off the hook. But when that unit breaks down, the state steps in to ensure the flow of money continues. They don't care about fair. They care about stable. They care that one party, usually the higher earner, continues to subsidize the other party so the other party doesn't become a burden on the public welfare system. You are not a husband. You are not a wife. You are a utility provider. And the state is the regulator ensuring the service continues even after the customer has cancelled the contract. Look at that bed again. Strip away the comforter. Strip away the sheets. Look at the mattress. Imagine the great seal of the state stamped right in the middle of it. Imagine a bureaucrat sitting in the corner with a clipboard, taking notes every time you have an argument, calculating the liability, waiting for the moment you file the paperwork so they can execute the clauses you never bothered to read. You didn't just marry a person. You married the system. And the system always wins. You weren't stupid. You weren't naive. You were drugged. If you walked into a car dealership after chugging a fifth of vodka, stumbling, slurring your words, and tried to sign a lease for a Ferrari, the finance manager would stop you. Legally, they have to. A contract signed under the influence of intoxicants is voidable. The law recognizes that a chemically altered brain cannot offer informed consent. But when you signed your marriage license, you were more intoxicated than any drunk driver on the road. You were under the influence of the most potent cocktail nature can brew: dopamine, norepinephrine, oxytocin. Psychologists have a name for this state. They don't call it true love. They call it limerence. It is a cognitive state that mimics the symptoms of obsessive-compulsive disorder. When you are in the throes of new romance, your serotonin levels drop to the same levels as a patient in a psychiatric ward. Your prefrontal cortex, the CEO of your brain, the part responsible for logic, risk assessment, and future planning, goes offline. The primitive brain takes over. The limbic system seizes the controls. Why? Because evolution doesn't care about your retirement portfolio. Evolution has one directive: reproduce. To achieve this, nature has to trick you. It has to blind you. If you looked at a potential partner rationally, if you analyzed their debt-to-income ratio, their family history of mental illness, their conflict resolution skills, you probably wouldn't mate with them. You would be too cautious. You would optimize for safety. So nature hijacks your dashboard. It floods your system with feel-good chemicals that act like blinders on a racehorse. You see a red flag. The chemicals paint it white. They scream at you for no reason. Your brain interprets it as passion. They are financially irresponsible. Your brain reframes it as spontaneity. You aren't seeing the person standing in front of you. You are seeing a projection created by a biological imperative to mix your DNA with theirs. You are technically psychotic, a temporary break from reality. And it is in this exact moment of chemical psychosis that society hands you a pen and says, "Sign this legal document that binds you for eternity." It is the perfect trap. The honeymoon phase isn't just a cute term, it is a biological timer. Scientists know that this chemical high has a shelf life. It lasts, on average, 12 to 18 months, just enough time to meet, mate, and secure a pregnancy. Then the fog lifts. One morning you wake up. The dopamine drip stops. The prefrontal cortex flickers back on. You look across the pillow, and for the first time in 2 years, you see the person clearly. You notice they chew with their mouth open. You notice they are lazy. You notice they have a sense of entitlement that curdles your stomach. The quirks that used to be adorable are now grounds for homicide. This is the hangover. But unlike a hangover from alcohol, you can't just drink some water and sleep it off. You wake up sober, only to realize you signed a contract while you were drunk. You look at the ring on your finger. That isn't a symbol of eternity. It's the remnants of a fever dream. You try to have a rational conversation about money now, but you can't, because you established the precedent of your relationship during the psychosis. You set the rules when you were high. You taught them that you would tolerate anything, pay for everything, and ignore reality. Now, when you try to introduce logic, they look at you like you have changed. You used to be so romantic, they say. You used to not care about the price, they say. They are right. You did used to be that way because you were drugged. But now you are sober, and you are trapped in a cage built by your own hallucinations. This is why the divorce rate is so high. It's not because people change. It's because the drug wears off. The financial suicide wasn't a conscious choice. It was a biological trick. You bet half your net worth on a chemical reaction that was destined to fail. And the worst part, you'll probably do it again. Because the high feels so good, you'll convince yourself that this time it's different. This time it's real. Pause. Recognize the mechanism. Stop romancing the poison. The feeling of falling is not a sign of destiny. It is a warning sign that your logic circuits are being cut. Imagine you own a construction company. You sign a contract with a developer to build a skyscraper. The contract is worth $50 million. You pour the concrete. You buy the steel. You hire the crew. You work for 5 years, sweating, bleeding, building this thing brick by brick. Then one morning, the developer walks onto the site. He looks at the building, which is 90% finished, and shrugs. "I'm not feeling it anymore," he says. "I'm unhappy. I've grown apart from this project. I want out." You stare at him. You can't just walk away, you say. We have a contract. If you break it, you have to pay me damages. You have to compensate me for the lost revenue. You have to make me whole. In the business world, you would be right. If he breaches the contract without cause, you sue him into oblivion. The law punishes the person who breaks the promise. Now, look at your marriage. You signed a contract. You promised, till death do us part. You built the life. You poured the concrete foundation of your family. And then, one Tuesday, your spouse walks into the kitchen. I'm not happy, they say. I need to find myself. I want a divorce. In any other area of law, this is a breach of contract. They are violating the terms. They are walking away from the deal. They should be liable for damages. But this is family law. And in 1970, California Governor Ronald Reagan signed the first no-fault divorce statute, a plague that swept across the entire Western world. You understand what no-fault means. It means they don't need a reason. They don't need to prove you cheated. They don't need to prove you were abusive. They don't need to prove you abandoned them. They just have to say the magic words, irreconcilable differences. That's it. That is the legal equivalent of I don't want her anymore. But here is where the nightmare truly begins. In the business world, the person who breaks the contract pays the penalty. In the marriage world, the person who breaks the contract often gets paid. Let that sink in. Your spouse can cheat on you. They can decide they are bored. They can decide they want to run off with the personal trainer. They break the vow. They dismantle the family, and the court says to you, okay, cut them a check for half of everything you earned while they were planning their exit. This is the only contract in existence where the party who breaches the agreement is rewarded with a cash prize. Imagine if you leased a car, drove it for 3 years, and then walked into the dealership and said, I'm bored of this car. I'm breaking the lease. And by the way, I want you to give me half the value of the dealership. It is insanity, but it is the law. The no-fault system stripped marriage of its binding power. It converted a covenant into a day-to-day lease agreement, terminable at will by either party, with a golden parachute for the one who pulls the ripcord. You think your marriage is secure because you are a good husband or a good wife. Wrong. You can be perfect. You can be the best provider, the best lover, the best parent. It doesn't matter. If their feelings change, the contract dissolves, and you pay the freight. The system is designed to incentivize the break. Think about the incentives. If your spouse is unhappy but they have no money, they might stay and work on the marriage. They might try counseling. They might try to fix it. But if the law tells them, hey, if you leave, you get $500,000 cash, $4,000 a month in alimony, and you get to be free to pursue your happiness, what do you think they are going to do? The law dangles a carrot in front of the unhappy partner. Leave, it whispers. It pays better to leave than to stay. You are living with a gun to your head, but you handed the gun to them, and the state loaded the bullets. Every day you stay married is a day you are hoping they don't realize that pulling the trigger is the most profitable financial move they can make. You didn't sign a commitment. You signed a hostage situation, and the moment they realize the ransom has been set by the state, you are already dead. Imagine you walk into your boss's office tomorrow. He looks at you and says, you're fired. Get out. You pack your box. You hand in your badge. You walk out to the parking lot. You are unemployed. The relationship between you and the company is severed. But then you get a letter in the mail. It says, because you became accustomed to a certain salary while working here, the company must continue to pay you 40% of your wages for the next 7 years. We must maintain the lifestyle to which you became habituated. You would think you were dreaming. No company on earth works like that. When the value exchange stops, the payments stop. That is the fundamental rule of economics, But in the courtroom, the laws of economics are suspended. Welcome to the concept of the maintained lifestyle. This is the single most dangerous entitlement in the family law code. The court does not look at what your spouse needs to survive. They don't look at the cost of a studio apartment and a bus pass. They look at how you lived when times were good. They hire a forensic accountant. This stranger digs through your credit card statements from the last 3 years. They look at the vacations you took. They look at the restaurants you ate at. They look at the car leases. They look at the private school tuition, and they tally it all up. Then they look at you and say, this is the baseline. This is the standard of living established during the marriage. Because you were successful, because you were generous, because you wanted to give your family a good life, you have set a trap for yourself. Your success is now the noose around your neck. The judge looks at your soon-to-be ex and says, they are accustomed to the Lexus. They are accustomed to the Hamptons in the summer. It would be unfair to ask them to adjust to a lower standard of living just because the marriage ended. Read that again. It would be unfair for them to live within their own means. So the court orders you to bridge the gap. You are ordered to pay alimony or spousal support. This isn't child support. This isn't for the kids. This is a direct cash transfer from your paycheck to an adult capable of working solely to fund a lifestyle they cannot afford on their own. You are paying for the gasoline in a car you aren't allowed to drive. You are paying the mortgage on a house you aren't allowed to sleep in. You are funding the dinners they will eat with their new partner. And here is the psychological horror. You are now an indentured servant. Let's say you are burnt out. You've been grinding for 20 years. You want to take a step back. You want to quit the high-stress executive job and open a small bookstore. You want to downsize. You can't. The court calls this voluntary underemployment. If you try to lower your income, the judge will look at your earning capacity. They will say, we know you can make $250,000 a year, so we are going to order you to pay support as if you are making that amount. If you don't pay, you go to jail. Civil debtors' prisons were abolished centuries ago with one exception, family court. So you stay in the job you hate. You swallow the stress. You take the blood pressure medication. You keep grinding the millstone, not to build your own future, but to subsidize the comfort of someone who filed paperwork to remove you from their life. They get the lifestyle. You get the heart attack. This is the ultimate entitlement. They feel entitled to the fruit of your labor, but they don't want to help tend the tree. They want the dividends without the risk, and the state agrees with them. The state views you not as a human being with a right to your own life, but as a host organism. As long as you are producing, the parasite must be fed. You thought you were a provider. No, you are a battery, and they will drain you until the light goes out. Look at the room you are sitting in. Look at the furniture. Look at your computer. Now, imagine piling all of it into the center of the room and setting it on fire. That is essentially what happens when you hire a divorce lawyer. You walk into an office that smells like old money. Mahogany desks, leather chairs, a view of the city skyline. The attorney sits across from you, wearing a $3,000 suit. They look you in the eye with practiced empathy and say, I am going to fight for you. We are going to get what you deserve. You feel a wave of relief. You think you have hired a gladiator. You think you have hired a protector. You haven't. You have just bought a ticket to the divorce industrial complex. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry that runs on a single fuel source. Your conflict. If you and your spouse sit down at the kitchen table, agree to split everything 50/50, and sign the papers, the industry starves. A mediator charges a flat fee. It's cheap. It's fast. It's over. But that is bad for business. So the system is designed to radicalize you. It is designed to turn a disagreement into a war. Here is how it happens. You tell your lawyer, we actually agreed that I would keep the house and she would keep the retirement accounts. It's roughly equal. Your lawyer pauses. They frown. They lean in. Are you sure about that? They ask. The housing market is volatile. We need a formal appraisal. And what about the tax implications of the 401k? You might be getting shortchanged. Let me just send a letter to opposing counsel to clarify some points. You trust them. You say okay. They send the letter, but they don't write it like a normal human being. They write it in legalese. It sounds aggressive. It sounds accusatory. It demands documents. It sets a deadline. Your spouse receives this letter. They read it and think, I thought we agreed. Why are they attacking me? They panic. They call their lawyer. Their lawyer says, see, I told you they would play dirty. We need to file a motion to freeze the assets. We need to demand a discovery process. Suddenly, the deal is off. The war is on. The lawyers start firing emails back and forth. Every email costs you $100. Every phone call is $250. Every motion filed is $2,000. They are fighting over a collection of vinyl records. You don't even care about the records, but your lawyer tells you, it's the principle. If we give in on this, they will walk all over us on the alimony. So you fight. 6 months later, you have spent $15,000 on legal fees. Your spouse has spent $15,000. That's $30,000 gone from the family estate. That money isn't going to your retirement. It isn't going to your kids' college fund. It is going to pay for the mahogany desk and the view of the skyline. You are burning the furniture to keep the house warm, and here is the dirtiest secret of them all. The lawyers are on the same team. You think it's you vs. them. No, it's the lawyers vs. the estate. Your lawyer and your spouse's lawyer know each other. They see each other in court every day. They go to lunch together. They go to the same bar association galas. While you are at home, hyperventilating, staring at the ceiling, wondering how you are going to survive, they are sharing a bottle of wine and laughing about your case. Can you believe he won't let go of the dog? One says. I know, the other laughs. I think I can get another 20 billable hours out of the custody dispute before we settle. They are munitions dealers selling bullets to both sides of a civil war. They have no incentive to end the war quickly. Peace pays pennies. War pays for their summer homes in Nantucket. The system requires you to hate each other. If the anger fades, the revenue dries up. So they stroke your ego. They validate your rage. They tell you that you are a victim and the other side is a monster who must be punished. They are literally monetizing your misery. By the time you finally settle, and 95% of cases do settle, usually for the exact terms you could have agreed to on day one, the pot is empty. You fought for the whole pie, but the lawyers ate the filling, and you are left fighting over the crust. You didn't just commit financial suicide. You hired a hitman to pull the trigger, and he charges by the hour to make it slow. You think there is a line. You think, okay, we are fighting about money. We are fighting about the house, but we will never use the kids. We both love them. They are off limits. You are wrong. In the family court system, children are not people. They are not little humans with souls and feelings. They are variables in an algorithm. They are poker chips in a high-stakes game of Texas Hold'em, and they are the most valuable currency on the table. Here is the cold, hard math of custody. In almost every jurisdiction, child support is calculated using a formula. The inputs are your income, their income, and, crucially, the percentage of time each parent spends with the child. Do you see the perverse incentive? If your spouse has the children 50% of the time, they get a certain amount of money. But if they can maneuver that number up to 80% or 100%, the monthly check doubles. Suddenly, letting you see your own son on a Tuesday night isn't a parenting decision. It's a financial loss. Every hour you spend with your children is money taken out of their pocket, so the war begins. It starts subtly. They enroll the kids in soccer practice on your weekends. They schedule doctor's appointments during your visitation time. They forget to drop them off. They tell the kids, "Daddy is busy, he can't see you today," when you are sitting by the phone waiting. They are manufacturing a status quo. They are building a case to show the judge that the children are settled with them, and disrupting that routine would be harmful. But if that doesn't work, if you fight back, then they reach for the nuclear weapon. Lawyers call it the silver bullet. It is an allegation of abuse. It doesn't have to be true. It doesn't have to be proven. It just has to be said. "I'm afraid for the children's safety," they whisper to the judge. "He has a temper. He drinks. He grabbed my arm." Boom, in that second, the burden of proof flips. In criminal court, you are innocent until proven guilty. In family court, when the safety of a child is at risk, you are guilty until proven innocent. The judge issues a temporary restraining order. You are kicked out of your house. You are barred from seeing your children. You are branded a danger. To see them, you now have to pay for a supervised visitation center. You have to sit in a sterile room with a social worker taking notes while you try to play Lego with your confused, crying daughter who doesn't understand why daddy can't come home. Meanwhile, the clock is ticking. The status quo is solidifying. Months go by while you fight to clear your name. And by the time you finally prove the allegation was baseless, the damage is done. The court says, "Well, the children haven't seen you in 6 months. We need to reintroduce you slowly. Let's start with every other Saturday afternoon. You have been erased. You are no longer a father. You are a visitor. You are a paycheck with a face," and the psychological damage to the children, the confusion, the feeling of abandonment, collateral damage. The system doesn't care. The system pretends to operate in the best interests of the child, but in reality, it operates in the best interests of the revenue stream. By turning custody into a cash-for-access equation, the state ensures that children become weapons. You aren't co-parenting. You are in a hostage negotiation. "Give me the house," they say, "and I'll let you have them for Christmas. Sign the alimony agreement," they say, "and I'll drop the restraining order." You look at your ex-spouse, the person you made these children with, and you realize they are willing to traumatize your offspring to secure a slightly higher monthly deposit. And you will pay. You will give them everything. You will sign away your retirement, your dignity, and your future just to tuck your kid into bed one more time. And they know it. That's why they aimed the gun at the kids in the first place. Pause. Stop looking at the judge. Stop looking at the lawyer. Stop looking at your ex-spouse. Walk to the bathroom in the courthouse hallway. Stand in front of the mirror. Look at the face staring back at you. That is the person who did this. You want to blame the system? Fine. The system is rigged. You want to blame the laws? Fine. The laws are archaic. You want to blame your ex? Fine. They are vindictive. But who chose them? You did. You picked the assassin. You hired the hitman. You handed them the knife, exposed your throat, and said, "I trust you. Go back to the beginning." Not the wedding. Before that. Go back to the first few dates. The signs were there. They were flashing in neon red, but you were wearing rose-colored glasses, so they just looked like flags. Remember how they talked about their exes? "My ex was crazy. My ex was abusive. My ex ruined my life." You thought, "Oh, poor thing, I'll be different. I'll save them." You didn't realize you were just auditioning for the role of the next crazy ex. Remember the drama, the volatility, the way they would pick a fight over nothing and then have passionate make-up sex. You called it chemistry. You called it fire. It wasn't fire. It was instability. It was emotional dysregulation. You vetted for excitement. You vetted for hot. You vetted for fun. You didn't vet for character. You didn't ask, does this person have integrity when no one is watching? You didn't ask, how does this person handle conflict with logic or with nuclear warfare? You didn't ask, does this person value fairness over winning? You saw the warning signs, and you ignored them because they were wrapped in a pretty package. Maybe they were bad with money then, too. Oh, I just like to treat myself, they said, and you laughed. You picked up the check. You felt like a provider. You liked the feeling of being needed. You fed the entitlement because it fed your ego. You didn't marry a partner. You married a dependent. And now you are shocked that the dependent is acting like a dependent. You saw the scorpion. You knew it was a scorpion. You let it ride on your back across the river. And when it stung you halfway across, drowning you both, you gasped. Why? Because it's a scorpion. That is its nature. But you have a brain, you have agency, you have the ability to discern patterns. And you chose to turn that part of your brain off because you wanted to get laid, or you wanted to fit in, or you were afraid of being alone. This is the hardest pill to swallow. The financial suicide wasn't an accident. It was a negligent discharge of a weapon you insisted on playing with. You valued the wedding more than the marriage. You valued the feeling more than the contract. You walked into a high-stakes business merger with a person you wouldn't trust to walk your dog simply because they made your heart race. And now you are paying the stupidity tax. That's what this settlement is. It's the price of your own lack of judgment. It's the tuition fee for the lesson you refuse to learn the easy way. So when you write that check, that massive, painful check that wipes out your savings, don't write it with anger at them. Write it with anger at yourself. Let the pain burn. Let it sear the lesson into your terrifyingly thick skull. Because if you don't own this, if you keep playing the victim, if you keep saying, I got screwed, you know what's going to happen. You're going to heal. You're going to get lonely. You're going to meet someone new. They're going to be different. They're going to be exciting. And you're going to do it all over again. You are the common denominator in your own destruction. Until you fix the picker, you will keep picking the poison. Look in the mirror. That is the only person who can save you now. So, here is the binary choice. You have two options. Option A. You can ignore everything I just said. You can call me a cynic. You can tell yourself that I'm bitter, that I'm hurt, that I don't understand your unique and special love story. You can go out there, find a nice person, get swept up in the chemicals, and sign the state's default contract without reading it. If you do that, you are walking into a casino, putting your entire life's earnings on red and praying the wheel spins your way. Maybe you'll win. Maybe you'll be the statistical anomaly who stays happily married for 50 years. But know this, if you lose everything. And the house odds are stacked against you. Option B, you can stop being a child and start acting like a CEO. If you are going to get married, if you are absolutely dead set on bringing the government into your relationship, then you must treat it for what it is, a merger and acquisition. And no CEO signs a merger without an exit strategy. This brings us to the only tool that can save you, the prenuptial agreement. I know what you're thinking. Prenups are unromantic. Prenups are planning for failure. If we need a prenup, we shouldn't get married. Wrong. Do you have car insurance? Does that mean you are planning to crash your car? Does that mean you want to hit a tree? No. You have insurance because you are an adult who understands that accidents happen, and you want to ensure that a moment of bad luck doesn't ruin your financial future. A prenup is not a divorce plan. It is an insurance policy against the destruction of your life. It is a document where you and your partner, while you still love each other, while you are still rational, decide what is fair. You decide that your retirement is yours. You decide that the business you built is off limits. You decide that alimony will be waived. You write your own law instead of letting the state impose theirs. And here is the ultimate test. Tonight, go to your partner. Look them in the eye. Say this: I love you. I want to build a life with you. But I believe that marriage is a spiritual union, not a financial transaction. So, to protect us both, I want to sign a prenuptial agreement that keeps our assets separate and waives alimony. I want to be with you for you, not for a safety net. And I want you to be with me for me, not for my future earnings. Watch their face. If they say, of course, that makes sense. I have my own career, I don't need your money, then you have found a partner, you have found an equal. But if they recoil, if they get angry, if they cry and say, you don't trust me, if they say, but what if I stop working, how will I survive? Run. Do not walk. Do not hesitate. Run, because they just told you who they are. They just revealed that they view this marriage as a financial vehicle. They are already calculating the payout. They are already looking at your potential earnings as their insurance policy. They are not looking for a spouse. They are looking for a host. The uncomfortable truth is this: real love doesn't need a contract to enforce it. Real love doesn't need the threat of financial ruin to keep it alive. If you need the government to force someone to stay with you, it's not a marriage, it's a prison. So, look at the ring in the box. Look at the license on the desk. If you sign that paper without protection, you are not a romantic hero. You are a volunteer victim. Put the pen down, draft the prenup. Ask the hard questions. And if you can't have the hard conversation about money before you get married, you definitely won't be able to survive the conversation about money when you get divorced. Do not get married until you are ready to treat forever like a business. Because if you don't run your marriage like a business, the divorce court will turn it into a bankruptcy. The choice is yours. Sign the paper or save your life.